In the borderlands of Galilee, where the winds carried secrets across stone and sand, there lived a man whose story few remembered, but whose steps changed the fate of empires. His name was Andrew, brother of Peter, follower of John, disciple of the Messiah. He was not the loudest nor the boldest. He didn't seek thrones or swords, but within him burned a flame, silent, steady, and unyielding. He was the first to follow, the first to believe, the first to step into the unknown when others hesitated. His journey began in the wilderness of the Jordan, where wild men shouted of judgment and rivers whispered of salvation. It led through stormy villages, secret gatherings, and foreign lands where danger waited in every alley. His was a path of peril and purpose, without fame, but with fire. He would speak of truth in shadowed temples, challenge the powerful with words instead of weapons, and carry a message stronger than death to the edges of the world. This is not the tale of a forgotten brother. This is the saga of a hidden flame, one that refused to die. This is the story of Andrew, the silent flame. Chapter 1. Echoes in the Wilderness. The wind howled across the barren rocks of Judea, carrying with it the scent of dust, fire, and something else, expectation. The sun scorched the cracked earth, and the few fig trees that clung to life twisted like ancient prophets, whispering to no one. Deep within this wilderness, where few dared to linger, a voice thundered, not from the heavens, but from a man whose very presence stirred fear and awe. Andrew crouched behind a jagged outcrop, his eyes fixed on the wild figure standing waist-deep in the River Jordan. John, the baptizer, draped in camel's hair and girded with a leather belt. He looked less like a man and more like a storm given flesh. His voice, sharp as iron and wild as the desert wind, called for repentance, not to beg, but to prepare. Prepare for something or someone greater. Andrew's heart pounded. He had left his nets, his village, and even the side of his brother Peter to come here. Not for the spectacle, but for something he couldn't name. A hunger that gnawed deeper than bread. A thirst that water couldn't quench. He had heard the rumors, that prophets had returned, that heaven was stirring, that the time of waiting was over. John turned, and for a moment, Andrew felt those burning eyes land on him. He flinched, not in fear, but as if a gate within his soul had creaked open. This wasn't theater. It was war, not with swords, but with truth. Not for land, but for the hearts of men. For days, Andrew listened. He watched men of power slink away, undone by words. He saw thieves weep, soldiers tremble, and old men confess sins buried for decades. And through it all, John kept saying one thing. There is one coming after me. I am not worthy to untie his sandals. One morning it happened. He came, not in a blaze of glory, but in silence. A man walked toward the river, dust on his robe, sun on his shoulders, a calm that parted the chaos around him. John stopped mid-sentence, his voice failing. All eyes turned. Andrew's breath caught. There was no thunder, no lightning, but the wilderness went still. Behold, John whispered, trembling, the Lamb of God. Time slowed. Andrew didn't understand, not fully, but the flame inside him roared to life. Without thinking, he stepped from the shadows and followed. Not out of curiosity, but conviction. He didn't need a crown. He needed truth, and he had seen it in that man's eyes. He followed at a distance, silent as always. The man turned and spoke just 4 words. What are you seeking? Andrew paused. The desert fell quiet again. Rabbi, he said, where are you staying? The man smiled. Come and see. And so, the first steps were taken, not toward safety, but destiny. Not toward glory, but a revolution that would begin with whispers and end with a cross. Andrew did not know it then, but history had shifted, and the wilderness, once a place of exile, had become the birthplace of a flame that would never die. Chapter 2. The First Light. Capernaum awoke to the scent of salt and smoke, the hush of dawn broken only by the distant creaking of nets and the low hum of boats skimming across the Sea of Galilee. Fishermen, hardened by tides and time, moved like shadows across the water, silent, precise, eternal. Among them walked Andrew, no longer merely a fisherman, but not yet an apostle. Something had changed. The sun had not risen, but he had seen the light. He had spent the day before with the rabbi, Yeshua. No titles, no miracles, no proclamations. Just a quiet fire, a few words exchanged beneath the stars, and the weight of eternity humming beneath every silence. And yet, Andrew had known. This was the one, the promised one, the one John had pointed to, the Messiah. He didn't run to announce it from the rooftops. That wasn't his way. Andrew moved like a tide, gentle but relentless. His first instinct wasn't to preach, but to find his brother, Simon. Andrew found him repairing a torn net, muttering at the stubborn cords. His hands were strong, scarred by years of battle with the sea. His heart, fierce and slow to change. But Andrew knew his brother's soul like the stars knew the night sky. "We found him," he said simply. Simon looked up skeptical. "Who?" Andrew's eyes burned with a quiet fire. "The Messiah." Simon froze. The word hung in the air like thunder before the strike. Then, without a word, he stood and followed. Not because he believed yet, but because when Andrew spoke like that, the world tended to shift. They found him by the shore, surrounded by nothing but silence and sand. Yeshua turned, his gaze piercing, ancient, unafraid. "You are Simon, son of Jonah," he said, as if reading from a book already written. "But you shall be called Cephas, Peter, the rock." Simon blinked. Andrew felt the moment ripple through time. A new name, a new purpose. The road was beginning. In the days that followed, others came. Philip, Nathanael, men with questions, doubts, hopes etched in stone. Andrew watched, always at the edge, guiding, listening, never needing the spotlight. He didn't command the room. He illuminated the path. When the rabbi walked through the marketplaces and the olive groves, Andrew walked at his side, not as a leader, but as a lantern bearer. He brought people forward, a boy with 5 loaves, a group of Greeks seeking truth. He didn't speak often, but when he did, doors opened. He was the quiet hinge on which great moments turned. And yet, he never craved power. He had seen enough storms to know that thunder fades. But flame endures. Silent, steady, alive. That night, under a sky littered with stars, Andrew sat alone by the sea. The waves whispered like old friends. Somewhere behind him, the Messiah slept, the others nearby. But Andrew remained awake, gazing into the horizon. He had taken the first step, and though the world did not yet know his name, the heavens did. The flame had been lit, and it would burn until the end of days. Chapter 3. Brothers in the Storm. The wind rose like a beast awakened. Night had swallowed the sky, and the Sea of Galilee churned with the rage of unseen forces. The boat groaned as waves slammed against its sides, the sail whipping like a wounded bird. Thunder cracked across the heavens, and rain slashed downward, as if the very sky sought to drive them into the depths. Andrew clung to the mast, his fingers raw, his robe drenched and clinging to his frame. Lightning lit the darkness for a heartbeat, and in that flicker of fire, he saw Simon, Peter, gripping the tiller with wild defiance, face set like stone against the elements. They had faced many storms before, these brothers. Storms of water, storms of hunger, storms of Rome and taxes and fading hope. But this storm was different. This time, they weren't alone. Somewhere in the bow of the boat, the Messiah slept. "Master," one of them cried out, his voice lost in the roar. Andrew looked back. The teacher lay curled beneath a soaked cloak, unmoved by chaos, as if he slept not through ignorance, but through command. Peter cursed and shouted over the gale. "We're sinking. Why does he do nothing?" Andrew didn't answer. His heart beat like a drum, not with fear, but anticipation. Then, in a moment that cleaved history, Yeshua rose. He stood, not with the fury of a prophet nor the majesty of a king, but with the calm of one who had seen the storm before it was born. He raised a hand. No shouting, no incantation, just a word. "Peace, be still." And the wind died. The sea fell flat like polished glass. Rain ceased mid-fall like soldiers halting at a command. The clouds parted in reverence. Silence fell, and in that silence, the disciples stared, mouths open, breath caught, souls trembling. Andrew, chest heaving, looked at the man they followed, and for the first time, he truly understood. This was not just the Messiah of Israel. This was the master of creation, the voice that spoke when the world was born. Simon dropped to his knees, water lapping at his sides. Andrew remained standing, his body swaying with the sea's ghost memory of waves. He said nothing. He felt no need. The fire within him, that quiet, eternal flame, burned hotter now. But not with fear, with certainty. The storm had tested them, but not to destroy, to reveal. Later, when the others whispered of the miracle and argued what it meant, Andrew sat alone at the stern, his eyes on the calm horizon. Peter came and sat beside him, silent for a long time. "He commands even the sea," Peter murmured. Andrew nodded. "I was afraid I'd die," Peter admitted. Andrew smiled faintly, still watching the horizon. "I wasn't." Peter turned to him. "Why not?" Andrew didn't answer immediately. He traced the edge of the boat with his fingers, thinking of the voice that had calmed the storm and the deeper storm it had calmed within him. "Because we're already beyond the shore," he said softly. "There's no going back. He is the way forward, storm or no storm." Peter stared at his brother, seeing in his eyes not fire, but something deeper, something unbreakable. Faith forged not in thunder, but in silence. Chapter 4. The Path of Fire. The sun blazed above the Judean hills, turning the stones to embers and the dust to gold. The road stretched before them like a serpent of flame, winding through wilderness and shadow. Andrew walked in silence, his sandals worn thin by the journey, his cloak stained with sweat and the breath of cities. This was no longer the gentle path of Galilee. The villages behind them were fading, and before them lay the raw heart of the world, Jerusalem. He could feel it, a pull, like gravity, but not of earth. Something spiritual, magnetic, as if the city itself whispered in riddles through the wind. Beside him walked others, James, with his ever-watchful eyes, John, whose hands trembled from dreams he would not share, and Peter, bold as always, carving his way through uncertainty like a blade through wheat. And at the front, always just ahead, strode the teacher. Yeshua moved with the poise of a warrior, though he carried no sword. His eyes were fixed, his steps unwavering, as if he followed a path only he could see, a path that led not just to a city, but into the very furnace of destiny. Andrew watched him closely. He had seen kings and prophets in books and in memory, but never one like this. There was no crown upon his brow, no banner in his hand. Yet kingdoms trembled when he spoke. And the fire that Andrew had carried within since the river, since the storm, it burned brighter with every step. They passed through Samaria, where hostile eyes watched from shadowed doors. They passed fields where farmers bowed in reverence, not to royalty, but to hope. They passed beggars who wept with gratitude and Pharisees who spat with fear. And all the while, Andrew remained silent. He did not preach like Peter, nor question like Thomas. He listened, he watched, and he remembered. Each word from Yeshua was a spark, each healing a torch, each parable a hidden flame lighting corridors in the soul. Andrew gathered them, tucked them deep into his spirit, building a furnace not of words, but of purpose. At night, beneath olive trees, the others would sleep or argue or pray aloud. Andrew would simply stare at the stars. He remembered what John the Baptizer had said in the early days. He must increase, and I must decrease. At the time, Andrew hadn't understood. Now he did. To walk this path was to be consumed, not with fame, not with power, but with fire. Not the fire that destroys, but the fire that refines. And so he walked, each step a surrender, each breath a vow. Even as shadows gathered, even as Yeshua spoke of death, of betrayal, of suffering to come, Andrew did not flinch, for he had already stepped into the flame. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Temple. The gates of Jerusalem loomed like the jaws of a beast, ancient, hungry, and waiting. For Andrew, stepping into the holy city was like walking into a storm made of stone and sound. The streets pulsed with life, teeming with travelers, traders, zealots, and priests. Every corner echoed with voices, some singing hymns, others whispering secrets. The temple dominated the skyline, a mountain of marble and gold, rising like a throne forged by heaven and guarded by man. Its steps had been worn smooth by centuries of devotion and ambition. Smoke from sacrifices coiled into the sky like prayers wrapped in ash. Andrew followed the teacher into the courts of the temple. At first, it felt like triumph. The people gathered. They listened. Some even shouted hosannas. But beneath the surface, something darker stirred. Eyes lingered too long. Questions were asked with blades hidden in their tones. The priests, robes immaculate and hearts sealed in pride, watched with the intensity of hunters tracking prey. Andrew could feel the tension like a wire pulled tight across his chest. Yeshua moved through the temple as if he owned no fear. His words, sharp and luminous, pierced through hypocrisy like lightning tearing open the sky. He overturned tables, not out of rage, but justice. He cast out merchants and money changers as if sweeping dust from sacred ground. And with every act, the fire in Andrew's heart swelled. But so did the danger. One night, beneath the portico of Solomon, Andrew walked the perimeter listening. The city did not sleep. In the alleys and behind closed doors, voices plotted. The whispers slithered like snakes through the cracks of the temple walls. They say he speaks blasphemy. They say he plans rebellion. They say he must be stopped. Andrew pressed his back against the cold stone and breathed deep. Fear tasted like metal. The fire inside him did not go out, but it flickered. Could they see it? Could they smell the smoke rising from Yeshua's words? He remembered the river again, the baptizer's voice echoing across water and time. Behold the Lamb of God. Andrew hadn't known then what it meant. But now the pieces began to fall into place. The temple was not just a place of worship. It was a battlefield. This was not a mission of safety. It was a collision course. Back at their lodging, the others argued again. Some feared the confrontation. Others relished it. Peter's voice thundered with resolve, but even he seemed shaken. Thomas paced like a man trapped between two realities. And Andrew? He sat in the corner, silent as always, his eyes on the window, watching the moon climb over the temple's golden crown. He could feel the flame shifting, not fading, transforming. The teacher was no longer just a beacon. He was a fuse. The temple would not hold, not because of swords or revolts, but because the truth had entered its gates, and truth does not kneel to structures built on pride. Andrew knew then. The fire would soon burst from the shadows into full blaze. But would they survive the burning? He didn't know. Still, he would follow. Chapter 6, The Olive Warning. Night fell like a shroud over Jerusalem, veiling its golden stones and shadows. But on the Mount of Olives, the teacher's words burned brighter than the torches flickering in the valley below. Andrew stood among the 12, the scent of pressed olives lingering in the air. From their perch, the temple still glowed, proud, unyielding. Yet Yeshua's voice carved through the darkness like a sword through silk. Not one stone will be left upon another, he said, his eyes fixed on the holy city. It will all be thrown down. The word struck Andrew like a thunderclap. The temple? Destroyed? He had walked its courts, felt the weight of its history. It was the heart of their people, their story, their covenant. And yet, Yeshua spoke with the calm of someone not foretelling doom, but inevitable change. What will be the sign? Someone asked. And then the flood came. Parables wrapped in riddles. Warnings of false messiahs and rising nations. Of famine and betrayal. Of families torn apart and faith tested like gold in fire. Andrew's mind spun as the teacher painted a vision not just of their future, but of the world cracking open. And through it all, one truth pulsed beneath the surface. They would not escape the storm. Andrew looked to Peter, whose jaw clenched with defiance. To John, whose eyes shimmered with unspoken understanding. And then to himself, always the quiet one, the watcher, the one who had first followed but never led. And yet tonight, as the olive trees swayed above him, something shifted. He began to understand why he was there. Not to command, not to shine, but to stand firm when others faltered, to be the steady hand when the fire fell, to burn quietly but unyieldingly. Yeshua's voice softened. "Keep watch," he said, "for no one knows the hour, not even the angels." Andrew felt the weight of that charge settle on his shoulders. The hour would come. The darkness would press in, and when it did, the loud would scatter. The proud would fall, but those who watched in silence, those who listened closely like he always had, might yet endure. As the night deepened and the teacher fell into prayer beneath the stars, Andrew remained close. Not because he sought answers, but because he knew the storm was already on the move. The Mount of Olives would not forget this night, and neither would he. Chapter 7. Chains of Silence. The city of Jerusalem had fallen into a restless quiet, but beneath its ancient stones, tension rippled like an unseen current. The arrest of Jesus had sent shockwaves through the ranks of his followers, scattering many into hiding. Yet Andrew, the silent flame, was caught in the storm, bound in heavy iron chains, thrust into the darkest prison beneath the city. The cold iron bit deep into his wrists, leaving cruel impressions as the cold stone walls pressed around him. Darkness swallowed every corner, but Andrew's mind blazed with memories and purpose. This was no ordinary imprisonment. It was a trial of faith, a crucible to test the spirit. He thought back to the days by the Jordan River, when he first followed the voice calling him out of obscurity. The days of walking dusty roads with the teacher, hearing parables that stirred the soul, and watching miracles that shattered reality. The storm on the sea, the calm in the chaos, all flashes of light now burning like embers in his heart. Outside the prison walls, the world was changing fast. Rumors of betrayal and betrayal's bitter kiss filled the air. Whispers of executions and rising tensions. The great temple was trembling under the weight of prophecy. Andrew's heart pounded with a quiet but fierce hope that this night of darkness would not be the end, but the beginning. Days merged into nights, and Andrew's spirit became a battlefield of doubt and resolve. Every moment chained to stone tested his conviction, yet his faith did not waver. He was not just a prisoner of iron, but a prisoner of destiny, charged with a silent mission. He remembered the teacher's words, to be the salt and light in a world that often chose darkness. Andrew understood now that even silence could roar louder than any shout. The world needed steady flames, unyielding, undimmed by fear. The chains could bind his body, but never his soul. When the dawn broke beyond the prison's cold walls, Andrew was ready. His silence was no longer weakness. It was the forge of strength. The silent flame was preparing to ignite the world. Chapter 8. The Crossroads of Destiny. Dawn spilled over the horizon like molten gold, bathing the land in light that promised new beginnings. Andrew stood at a literal crossroads outside Jerusalem, the wind carrying whispers of a world forever changed. His journey had been one of transformation, from the quiet fisherman casting nets on Galilean waters to the silent follower at the teacher's side, and now a man poised on the brink of destiny. Before him stretched two paths, one leading back to the shores of his youth, to the familiar and safe life of a fisherman. The other, a narrow, winding road into the unknown, into lands where the teacher's message had not yet traveled. The choice was monumental. Andrew's heart thundered with the weight of that decision. The path back promised comfort, but also surrender, a retreat into the shadows. The road ahead whispered of trials, dangers, and sacrifices unimaginable, but also of glory and eternal purpose. He recalled the nights spent under the stars, the teacher's prophecies echoing in his mind, of storms to come, of kingdoms rising and falling, of the power to change hearts and nations. Andrew's fingers brushed the edge of his cloak, feeling the rough fabric like a tether to his past. But his soul reached out, hungry for something more. The world beyond awaited a bearer of fire, a light to pierce the darkness. He could no longer remain the forgotten brother, the silent shadow. He was called to blaze a trail, to carry forth a flame that would inspire millions. With every step, his resolve hardened. This was not merely a journey of survival, but one of purpose. As the sun climbed higher, Andrew took the first step down the road less traveled. The crossroads were behind him now. The future, unwritten and wild, stretched before him, and he was ready to face it all. Chapter 9. Fires in Foreign Lands. Andrew's journey led him far beyond the familiar shores of Galilee, into lands where the whispers of the teacher's message were still faint echoes in the wind. The sun scorched the dusty roads, and the cities rose like fortresses of stone and shadow. Each step was a step into the unknown, a venture into a world that neither awaited nor understood the silent flame he carried. The air was thick with tension. Political unrest simmered beneath the surface, while ancient rivalries and new fears tangled like serpents in the streets. Andrew moved quietly, but his mission was anything but silent. He was a spark, igniting hope in hearts long since hardened by hardship and despair. In crowded marketplaces, beneath the watchful eyes of curious strangers, Andrew spoke of the teacher's miracles, of healing hands that touched the sick, of eyes once blind, now open to light. His words were a fire, carried on the breath of winds, stirring something deep within those who listened. Yet, this mission was fraught with danger. Rumors of insurgents and informants followed his every move. One evening, as twilight bled into night, Andrew narrowly escaped an ambush by shadowy figures who sought to extinguish his light. The clang of swords and the roar of voices echoed through narrow alleys, but his calm resolve saw him through. During moments of solitude beneath vast, star-studded skies, Andrew wrestled with the weight of his task. Doubt clawed at him like a relentless storm. Was his flame strong enough to survive such darkness? But with each challenge, his faith hardened, tempered like steel forged in fire. He recalled the teacher's words, "You are the light of the world." This was no idle phrase. It was a calling, a charge to bring illumination to places swallowed by shadow. Through villages torn by poverty and cities swollen with ambition, Andrew's message traveled. People began to gather around him. Fishermen, merchants, mothers, and youth, each drawn by the promise of renewal, by the whisper of a new dawn. With every soul touched, the silent flame grew brighter. Andrew was no longer the forgotten brother. He was becoming a beacon, a force of courage and transformation sweeping across the lands like a wildfire that could not be contained. But the path ahead remained treacherous. The darkness fought fiercely, determined to snuff out the light. Yet Andrew's heart burned stronger than ever. He was the silent flame, destined to blaze trails where none had dared to tread. Chapter 10. The Silent Flame Ignites. After months wandering through foreign lands and countless encounters with those eager to hear the message, Andrew stood at the precipice of a new era. The quiet strength that had carried him from the caves of prayer to distant cities was no longer just a whisper. It had become a roaring fire within him and among those who believed. In the shadowed streets and sun-drenched plazas, the silent flame began to blaze with a power none could ignore. Andrew's words, once soft and cautious, now carried the weight of conviction forged in trial and perseverance. His presence inspired courage where there had only been fear. But the flame's growth stirred fierce opposition. Darkness gathered its forces, desperate to snuff out the light before it could spread beyond the boundaries of a few hearts. Andrew knew the coming days would test him like never before. Challenges not just of body, but of spirit. Yet, even as threats loomed, the fire within burned ever brighter. It was a fire born of faith, tempered by sacrifice, and fueled by an unyielding hope for a world transformed. As followers gathered, drawn by the flame's heat, Andrew understood his role was no longer that of a silent disciple, but a blazing beacon. His mission was clear: to ignite the hearts of the many, so that together the light could not be extinguished. With every soul touched, every life changed, the silent flame became an inferno, a force destined to shake the foundations of empires and inspire generations to come. This was the moment the silent flame ignited, a turning point that would echo through history, marking Andrew's journey from the forgotten brother to a legendary apostle whose light would never fade. Chapter 11. Paths of the Forgotten. The world beyond Galilee was vast and untamed, a tapestry of unknown lands and peoples untouched by the teachings Andrew carried in his heart. As the silent flame now burned fiercely within him, he stepped boldly onto these new paths, paths few dared to tread, where danger and destiny entwined. In distant villages nestled among rugged mountains and sun-scorched plains, Andrew's presence was like a spark set to dry tinder. His message of hope and salvation ignited fires in the souls of the forgotten and the forsaken. The marginalized, the lost, and the weary found solace in his quiet strength, and their faith blossomed like wildflowers breaking through stone. But every step forward was shadowed by trials. Bandits, skeptics, and the relentless forces of oppression sought to silence his voice. Yet Andrew moved with purpose, weaving through hostile lands with the determination of a man chosen by fate itself. Through whispered prayers beneath starlit skies and fervent sermons in crowded marketplaces, Andrew's journey became legend. Each encounter tested his resolve, yet forged an unbreakable spirit. The silent flame was no longer hidden. It illuminated the darkest corners of the world. Amidst the dangers, friendships were forged, alliances formed, and hope rekindled. Andrew knew that though history might forget many paths, his journey would leave a mark eternal, a testament to faith's quiet but unyielding power. As he traveled onward, Andrew carried with him the weight of a mission far greater than himself. His footsteps traced a path for generations, a journey of courage, conviction, and the enduring flame that refuses to be extinguished. Chapter 12. The Edge of Sacrifice. As Andrew's journey pressed onward, the path grew darker and the stakes higher. The silent flame that had carried him across lands and hearts was now tested by the harshest trials, those that demanded not only courage but sacrifice. In a remote city ruled by suspicion and fear, Andrew found himself face to face with a choice that would define his legacy. The people yearned for hope, yet their rulers clung to power with iron fists, determined to crush any spark of rebellion or faith. This city, shrouded in shadows and whispers, was a crucible where Andrew's faith would be forged anew. Days turned into weeks as Andrew moved among the people, his presence a quiet yet powerful challenge to the oppressive order. He spoke in hushed tones in crowded marketplaces, shared stories of salvation beneath the stars, and tended to the wounds of the broken with hands steady despite the growing dangers. Every smile he kindled, every soul he touched, became a silent act of defiance against the darkness. But the more the flame grew, the fiercer the opposition became. Spies lurked in every corner, and betrayal lurked where least expected. Friends were tested, and trust became a rare commodity. Yet Andrew's resolve never wavered. He understood that the greatest victories often come wrapped in sacrifice. One fateful night, as the city held its breath, Andrew was confronted by the ruler's enforcers. Their demand was clear: renounce his mission or face destruction. Standing at the crossroads between life and death, Andrew chose the path of faith. His voice rang with the quiet power of one who has walked through storms and emerged unbroken. The edge of sacrifice loomed close, a precipice between mortal fear and eternal glory. Andrew knew that whatever awaited him, his silent flame could not be extinguished. Instead, it would transform, burning brighter than ever before, lighting the way for generations to come. In that moment, amid shadows and uncertainty, Andrew's journey transcended mortal bounds. The silent flame was no longer just his. It was the spark of a movement, destined to change the course of history forever. Chapter 13. Fires Across the Horizon. After surviving the edge of sacrifice, Andrew's mission expanded beyond borders and seas. The silent flame, once a hidden ember, now surged into a blaze that crossed horizons and touched distant lands. Each village, each city he entered, became a new battlefield where faith and fate collided. With every step, Andrew carried the stories of those he had saved and the faces of those who had fallen. His voice echoed across mountains and deserts, proclaiming a message of hope that transcended language and culture. He was no longer just a follower. He was a pioneer, blazing trails where none had dared before. But the fires he ignited were met with fierce resistance. In foreign lands, Andrew faced unfamiliar customs, hostile rulers, and the chilling threat of exile. The weight of solitude pressed heavily on his shoulders, yet he pressed forward, fueled by the belief that no journey worth taking is without sacrifice. Through storms and sunshine, Andrew found allies in unexpected places, travelers, merchants, even former enemies who were moved by the power of his silent flame. Together, they formed a mosaic of faith, each piece contributing to a growing legacy. At night, beneath vast skies filled with stars, Andrew often reflected on his path. The road had been long, filled with peril and promise, and yet he felt a surge of unyielding purpose. The silent flame was no longer merely his. It was the light of countless souls yearning for redemption. As the fires spread across the horizon, Andrew knew his journey was far from over. The world awaited transformation, and he was ready to be its silent herald, the flame that would forever burn in the hearts of the faithful. Chapter 14. The Quiet Storm. The winds of destiny howled louder as Andrew ventured deeper into lands fraught with peril. His silent flame, though unseen by many, burned fiercely within him, a storm gathering strength beneath a calm surface. From bustling cities where shadows had whispered conspiracies to desolate villages clinging to ancient fears, Andrew's journey pressed onward. Each new land presented a fresh challenge, a crucible testing the limits of his faith and courage. The enemies he faced were no longer only distant threats. They lurked in the streets, in the eyes of rulers who saw his message as a danger to their power. Traveling by night, Andrew moved like a ghost, his presence barely noticed until the hope he carried ignited hearts with fierce determination. He spoke to the weary and the forgotten, those cast aside by cruel systems or trapped in despair. To them, he was more than a man. He was a promise of a new dawn. Yet, the storm within him was far from silent. Each step forward brought harsher trials, betrayal by those he once called allies, ambushes that tested his survival instincts, and long nights wrestling with doubt and the crushing loneliness of a path few dared to follow. In moments of quiet reflection, Andrew would climb the highest hills or stand at the edge of roaring seas, feeling the weight of his mission settle heavy on his shoulders. The silent flame was no longer just a spark. It had grown into a blazing inferno, consuming fear and uncertainty, fueling an unbreakable resolve. Legends began to spread, tales of a lone traveler who could calm storms with a word, who healed wounds with a touch, whose silent flame kindled the hearts of thousands. But fame was not Andrew's goal. His was a mission of humility, of unseen sacrifices made for the sake of a greater light. As the quiet storm rose within and around him, Andrew understood that the greatest battles were yet to come. The world was trembling on the brink of transformation, and he was destined to be the unseen force that sparked the change. His journey was a testament to the power of faith and perseverance, a reminder that even the quietest flame can ignite a roaring blaze that reshapes the future. Chapter 15. Destiny's Threshold. Andrew's journey had led him far from the quiet shores where it began, across rugged mountains, and through bustling cities cloaked in uncertainty. Now, he stood at the crossroads of destiny, a place where the fate of many would be decided and his true purpose revealed. This was no ordinary intersection of roads, but a meeting point of worlds, where ancient beliefs clashed with the rising light of a new faith. The air crackled with tension, the very ground seeming to hum beneath his feet. Every step forward carried the weight of unseen forces pulling at the threads of history. Andrew's heart burned with silent resolve. He knew that beyond this crossroad lay challenges that would test every lesson he had learned, every ounce of courage he possessed. Yet he was ready, for in the depths of his soul, the silent flame blazed brighter than ever, a beacon to those lost in darkness. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced like specters of the past, Andrew met those who would walk alongside him. Fellow travelers, seekers, and skeptics alike, each drawn by the promise of hope he carried. Together, they formed a force greater than any one man, united by faith and bound by destiny. At this pivotal moment, Andrew's quiet strength became a rallying cry. His whispered prayers turned into a roar that echoed through valleys and hills, inspiring countless souls to rise and follow. The humble fisherman's brother, once overshadowed and forgotten, now stood as a pillar of unwavering courage. The crossroads were not just a place of choice, they were a gateway to transformation. Andrew's journey, marked by silent storms and unwavering faith, had come to shape the course of history itself. And though the path ahead remained shrouded in mystery, one truth shone clear: the quiet flame would never be extinguished. The legacy of Andrew, the silent flame, would burn eternal, lighting the way for generations to come. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the life of Andrew, the silent flame. His story of courage, faith, and quiet strength reminds us that even the most humble can ignite the greatest change. If you enjoyed this tale, be sure to subscribe and follow our channel for more epic stories of the apostles, heroes whose legacies continue to inspire the world. Until next time, keep the flame alive.